at this guy. Look at this dude. This old white man. He's the patriarchy right there. Clearly a racist. This is a racist text. This here is J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. This is by far my favorite book. I own many copies of it. In fact, like collecting certain copies of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion, and a couple of others, Tolkien's work, but they're the main three that I like. Anyway, we've got a report come out that a study has found that a number of English texts, writings, prose, and theatrical plays are in fact racist. On that list, apparently, Tolkien. So yeah, if you read Tolkien, you're racist. There you go, you have it. Clearly, Gandalf, white dude, he's rushing to the Shire to dominate the small downtrodden folk of the Shire. Utter rubbish. Let's get into this story though. British taxpayer-funded anti-extremist study finds Shakespeare, Orwell, Tolkien key texts for white supremacists. Well, I have read all three of those. Is that a dagger I see before me? Will be Shakespeare there for you. Yeah, I've read all these sorts of things. Let's go through some of the other names that were on there. Shakespeare, Chaucer, Milton, Tennyson, Orwell, Huxley, another one of my favorite authors, Kipling, and Edmund Burke made the list. If you're reading any of these, you're in danger of becoming a white supremacist. They're extremist texts, apparently. Yeah, this was a government-led counter-terrorism program, essentially, where they looked at what factors. So they were looking at TV shows, movies, works of literature that have been included in a list of works that could potentially encourage far-right sympathies. Oh man, this is so stupid. You know, the painful part of this, like, I'm not obviously English, but I am a taxpayer in my own country, and the fact that this was paid for by taxpayers just grinds my gears. It really just kills me. This has got nothing to do with prepping, by the way. Sorry if you join me for prepping. I'll get into the prepping stuff in a sec. There's just every now and then we get stories and I look at it and I go, what the fuck? What the fuck, world? What the fuck, society? What is going on? So yeah, if you own or consume any of this stuff, things like Yes Minister, things like the Dam Busters, I can't even fathom how they made this link. But yeah, that's their key texts for white nationalists / supremacists. So you can put me on that list, apparently. Not that I give a shit about any of that stuff. I care what human beings can do, not what they look like, generally speaking. So yes, that's my rant for today. Let's get into some real stuff now. All right, I'm going to touch on a whole heap of the different war type conflict areas that we're having. So if you haven't heard me talk about this before, sorry, just a bit of a shout out for Reagan and Alpha on the YouTubes. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for the highs. Yeah, so I often talk about this ring of conflict that's going on at the moment, that, you know, we're very focused on Ukraine and what's going on there, and probably rightly so too. But there are a number of other problems that are going on in the world, a number of other flashpoints that could kick off to a larger war, really, at any stage here, now. So just to touch on a few of them, and I'll probably miss out on a couple here, but if we go south from Ukraine, probably the main one I'm looking at is Turkey, and you've got Turkey-Greece, but you've also got Turkey-Syria, and mainly Turkey and the northern part of Syria, the Rojava, which is the Kurdish part of Syria. So that's a big conflict area there. You've got Iran, Israel. I mean, you've got Israel, everyone. Israel, in fact, just apparently bombed the shit, or just did an attack on Damascus in Syria. So also they just had an earthquake, but I'll get to that in a second. But you've got that area there, Turkey. Then you've got Middle East, Iran, Israel. Then I kind of scoot around. You've got India, you've got Pakistan, which is at the cusp of being a failed state, if not technically already one. And they've had a long-standing conflict with India, so that could kick off. They're both nuclear nations as well. India, China, they quite infamously do not get along, especially along their border regions. China, Taiwan, obviously this is a big one you got to watch out for, and as a part of that, the Southeast Asia, Indonesia type area as well, and China pushing into the South China Sea, as it's now unanimously called, apparently. Moving further north, you've then got the Korean Peninsula. So North Korea, South Korea, you've also got Japan involved in that. Japan is also in conflict with Russia over some of the islands up in northern Japan that Russia is actually claiming, and has for many, 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 many years. That's not a new thing. So that's the ring of fire, or the smiley face of fire, as I like to call it. These are a number of conflicts that are going on. So I just want to touch on a few of these, and I'll start off in Ukraine, or the Ukraine area, because it's starting to spill off. So a bit more on Moldova. This is a few pieces of information, just so you can keep abreast of this. If you don't know what's going on here, Moldova's probably next in the firing line as far as Russia's concerned. They're already using softening techniques. We know that we know that. I'm not there on the ground, obviously. From what I can read in the sources that I look at, it appears that Russia is doing what Russia always does and softens their targets, uses soft power, uses fifth-generation warfare techniques, including social engineering techniques, in order to destabilize governments. So it is then more easier. That's not good English, man. It is easier for them to affect it in a military sense, and that's exactly like they've done it all over the world, but and for years and years. But we've seen this happen in Ukraine, especially in the Donbass region. So what are they doing? Moldova update here. The new PM wants the Russians out. So they do have Russian heritage, pro-Russian people. In fact, part of their parliament, I think it was something like 6 seats. Actually, I should be able to read this somewhere. 6 seats is held by the Shore Party, which is a Russian-friendly party within their government, out of 101 seats. So it's a minority, yes, but they're still holding seats. So that still tells you something. So the PM has come out. The Moldovan PM's come out. She said, "Look, we want the Russians out. We can see what they're doing here. They're destabilizing the government. They're trying to obviously do something against us. So we want them out now." This might seem like nothing to you, but this is the kind of it's not racism, but it's that when you're looking at wars, and you look historically at wars, there's always this split along some sort of lines, and it's usually I want to say genetic, or what people look like. Very infamously, you think back to World War II and what the US, the font of freedom and liberty, did to Japanese heritage people within their own country in World War II. They just immediately locked them up. They said, bang, put them in cages, locked up. No questions asked about it. We can't trust you. And if you don't believe me, watch Karate Kid. Okay, it happened to Mr. Miyagi. No, it actually happened. Shouldn't make light of it. It was a serious thing that did happen. But that's coming from, as I said, the US. So now we've got other countries. We can see this sort of stuff going on where they're starting to go, maybe we need to push these people out of the country. And maybe they're right. Or maybe this is a scapegoat. I don't know. It's just a worrying sign. When I see stuff like this, I go, this is definitely an increase in at least the Moldovan government, and in particular, the PM getting worried about going to war with Russia. So that's what I'm seeing there. So again, what I'm looking at here is not specifically like, as a prepper, like we need to go out and buy gas masks and CRBN filters and things like that for nuclear fallout. Although I'm not going to dissuade you from doing that if you particularly want to do that. What I'm saying here is like this is a bigger scale thing, and this is going to start spreading out further than Ukraine. And we want to know when that happens, because when it does happen, that's going to be a trigger point where certain other effects are going to happen. And even here in Australia and New Zealand, we're going to see certain things happen. If tomorrow, or even if today, right? For some reason, bombs slipped over borders and NATO said, that's it, we're in. That declaration there would rapidly change things in our world. Just as a rough guide of what I think might happen, again, this is my speculation, if an official war was declared versus Russia or anyone really. So, we're kind of them saying, okay, yeah, we're kind of in World War III now. We would see increase in prices on the shelves. We would see increase in price of fuel and things like that. We would start to go into wartime footing, wartime economy. Even here in Australia and New Zealand, we would still see that. We would start to get whispers of rationing and these sorts of things. We would start to get campaigns of people wanting to, trying to trump up people joining the military. We would see a definite drop of already subsequently dropped standards in order to get into military, and it would be pushing towards conscription. So that's the sort of thing that I'm starting to think about when I'm looking at information like this. The war is increasing. To prove the point, I guess, also, here's another little update, was protests took place yesterday. The protest was organized by a recently formed group called Movement for the People and supported by members of Moldova's Russia-friendly Shore Party. So you can see the increase in tension within Moldova there. Personally, I actually think Russia is destabilizing it. This is my opinion, judging by what I'm looking at there. They are destabilizing. They are going to move in to that area and do something. All right, let's jump over to Iran now. Here's a pretty disturbing report. This one was from Zero Hedge. Iran reportedly on the cusp of making nukes, having enriched uranium to 84% purity. Roughly speaking, from what I've researched, 90% purity in uranium is nuclear weapon. That's nuclear weapon grade uranium, and apparently they're 84%. So, they're getting more and more and more. Well, the last time anyone sort of checked or questioned about this, it was at 60%. So that's a pretty freaking big jump. All right, 24% or all of a sudden that they've gone up. So it clearly shows us that Iran is pushing towards nuclear weapons. So what does that mean? Israel will not let Iran get nuclear weapons. They will do everything they can, including deploying their own nuclear weapons, which they don't have. Israel officially doesn't say, or they don't say that they have any nuclear weapons. So if you've got a nuclear weapon as a country, you're supposed to come out and everyone's agreed that, yeah, we'll tell each other how many we've got, and if we've got them. Israel doesn't, but everyone knows Israel's got them, and there's pressure on Israel to get rid of them because people are looking at this situation going, oh, we know what's going to happen. Israel is not the country anymore that sits back on its heels and waits for the first person to swing. That's not the fight they fight anymore. They look in the future and they predict problems, and then they go and stamp that problem out as hard and as fast as they possibly can. And that includes the use of nuclear weapons, I believe, if they think their main opponent, being Iran right now, is going to gain nuclear weapons. It is, as far as they're concerned, an existential crisis. They look at this and they go, we will be wiped off the face of the earth and there's nothing we can do unless we strike first. Spyscale 27 says, how can one get out of conscription without jail? Well, that depends on what the conscription is. Historically speaking, the three big things that have got people out of conscription previously. There is a number of other things, but essentially what you're looking at with conscription historically speaking, is fighting age males, but it extends out. So definitely males between the age of 18 and 25. At wartime, what we've seen is 18 anywhere up to 45 is commonly, worked in there. In recent conflicts, we've seen 16 to 65. So, but mainly males, and now we've started to see it open up with females as well. So that's one thing that may be a mitigating circumstance is whether you have something dangling in between your legs or not. I wonder if you identify as a woman, if that could change that. Anyway, so that's one thing that's got out of it. University students historically have been out of it. So if you're enrolled in some sort of higher education course, then you're out of it. People with key what do you call it, jobs, like irreplaceable knowledge or jobs or skills, things like that, they can get out of it. The uber rich can get out of it, historically speaking, and that's not like a real official thing, but you can always see that happens in every other conflict where conscription has been called upon. And injury and or unsuitableness. So historically speaking, a condition something like scoliosis would preclude you from being drafted into the military. A condition like severe far or short-sightedness or some sort of visual impairment, hearing impairment could have, which I found odd because, within a few months of being in the military, you're probably going to have hearing impairment anyway. What other asthma, things like that, those sorts of conditions. But as I said, I believe there'll be a slackening of that sort of stuff if we do start to go into more conflict and it starts to look towards World War III. Like if we're talking Australia getting involved in a conflict here, then it's World War III as far as I'm concerned. I can't see us getting involved in any sort of like Vietnam type, shindig, which Ukraine is at the moment, but without pulling in other countries' soldiers too much. Sylvia Martini, how you going, Sylvia? Nice to see you. What about mental health? Well, that is a big thing. Of course, there is the catch, or the catch-22, as it were, which is a very amusing novel if you haven't read that. It's essentially this: people who don't want to fight in World War II, they're bomber pilots. They go, "Hey, I'm too crazy. I am actually crazy, and I can't fight in this. Like, I can't do this. I can't fly this plane." And they go, "Oh, it's interesting that you identified that, because you identifying it clearly shows us that you're not crazy. So, ergo, you're okay to fly the plane." So that's the catch-22. You can self-identify that you're crazy enough, but if you do, then you're obviously not crazy because you've self-identified it. So no problem. Also, MASH. You had a cross-dressing individual in that who was trying to kind of show, hey, I'm a bit crazy, maybe shouldn't be here. Mental health issues are something that could preclude you, especially if they are diagnosed and severe and require medication. But something that is like, hey, I'm mildly depressed and I have to talk to a therapist every couple of months, I don't think that's going to cut the mustard for something like conscription. I believe that's going to be glossed over. Previously speaking, any sort of drug use, any sort of criminal record, these sorts of things precluded you from military service. But again, like I said, I see a lowering in the standards if we were to go down this path. So if this is something you're concerned about, I'll put it this way: if you're doing your risk analysis and you're going, what, I'm concerned, I'm really concerned about this, what I would be doing now is taking steps. I would be looking at what conditions preclude or would precipitate a discharge from the military in a medical sense. So a medical discharge from the military. Have a look. You can go and find this stuff. Go, okay, yep, these are the conditions that would, if I was in the military now, would get me kicked out. And then I would start thinking about, do I have those conditions? And especially if you are suffering from mental health issues at the moment, these are the sorts of things that I would be probably looking at getting recorded as in creating a paper trail, if you know what I mean. That's the sort of thing, and just have that in your back pocket, because or just join. More meat for the meat grinder, more blood for the blood gods. All right, Iran nukes, no good. That's not what I was looking for. Once again, did not put these in order. Here's an interesting story, another one that came out of Zero Hedge. But I always jump on this sort of stuff because after being exposed to Peter Zeihan's worldview, I guess, a few years ago, I got put onto the idea that he talks about a lot about demographics and how demographics affect the maneuvering in a geopolitical space. And I find it fascinating. His big shtick is about what's going on in Ukraine was he actually wrote about that something very, very similar, like it was very prescient in what he was writing at the time, that something very, very similar would probably happen in and around Ukraine by Russia. And he based that off demographics, that they are collapsing in their demographics, which a number of countries are nowadays. So Russia being one, China being the next one. Japan is in it, or well into it, I guess. And I've got another story on that as well. So yeah, the demographics of Russia is starting to show. Apparently, what they're seeing is obviously they want to commit as many forces into this conflict, and they're ramping it up a bit. What's actually happening though is their pool of people to pull from is, I wouldn't say running out, but they can see it dwindling. But this is again, this is one of those catch-22 situations. They could have sat on their bum, they could have watched their demographics collapse, and they would not have had enough people in the right breeding age to bolster up that population. So it would have dwindled down, and their power and their effect would have dwindled down because they don't have enough fighting age males to commit to any sort of conflict. So they knew it's now or it's never. It is an existential crisis for them. They can see Russia will be annihilated. Add into this, like, why would they think that? Add into this the fact that NATO has been steadily expanding towards Russia since its inception. And so they're going, well, no, we're going to get wiped out. Everything about Russia will be pushed down, we'll be bullied, they'll take our resources. So all we can do right now is get on the front foot and attack first. And that's pretty much what they've done. The problem with that is you're accelerating that issue. So you can see that you've got a dwindling fighting age male population. So you're going, okay, while it's here, we're going to commit them to war. And that dwindles a lot faster because they're dying. So, yep, that's what we're seeing with some of the numbers that, I don't know, are being reported, are being guessed at by Western sources. Maybe it came to them in a dream or something, but some of this is actually solid reporting on those numbers. So just interesting there. So you can look at that. I will touch now on Japan because of this demographics thing. I just want to labor this point about demographics and how important it is that countries can see their country before their eyes. Once people figure it out, they go, oh, hang on, shit, we're about to collapse, like disappear. We're not going to have the power. We're not going to have the influence to do anything. Think of where does Tonga sit on the world stage versus the USA, versus China, versus even what's your next, Mexico or Canada. Okay, if any one of those countries had the need or the want to, or Australia, right? If any of these countries that I just mentioned wanted to take over Tonga, they could, because Tonga does not have the clout. They do not have the manpower. They do not have the people. They do not have the GDP. They do not have the military force in order to match these sorts of opponents. Definitely not like US, China, or anything like that, but not even Australia, not Canada, none of those places that I mentioned. That's what happens. Japan's looking at this and they're going, oh, we're about to collapse. We're not going to be able to have any effect in this area. And right now, like I said, they are technically involved in 3 different almost conflicts. One with Russia, they've got their nose squarely stuck in, and that's because of geographical location to the Korean Peninsula, and China as well. So China, Taiwan, that whole thing, Japan's on board. That's why we see Japan working so hard right now, doing something very similar to what Russia's doing. They're looking at it and they're going, shit, we're going to run out of fighting age males. We need to build an army now, like yesterday. We needed to build it yesterday. So they're ramping it up and they're going for it. What else are they doing here? This was really interesting story to me. And you might not see it from the headline, but this is all about demographics. Japan to grant permanent residency to all well-paid, skilled foreigners. So there's not any, what they're basically doing is saying, hey, we had some restrictions on people coming and living in our country and working in our country. Look, if you're at this level now, if you're getting paid this much and you've got a skill, come on in. Just come in. All right. So what they're basically admitting there is, we know our demographics are skewed towards the older population. Just so you know, if you don't know how demographics work, we've got a big population, the baby boom, essentially post World War II, and they did a whole heap of stuff, and that's why everything grew and grew and grew. Well, they're now switching over right now before our eyes. They're switching over into retired. Retired. They're switching over to retired, which means they're not generating any money for the economy anymore. They are taking money out of the economy. They are pulling their savings out. They are converting things that they had invested in, which were long-term thoughts to make them money. They're like, I'm old now. I don't want to make more money. I want to spend this fucking money. So I'm going to take it out and I'm going to convert stocks into cash. I'm going to change the way I consume now. And that has a pretty dramatic effect on a country's GDP. Also, if you think about it like from this perspective, superannuation in Australia, we're forced to do superannuation, which I think is a dumb idea, but also a smart idea because there are so many dumb people who can't save money to save themselves or can't plan ahead. So yeah, we need to force savings upon certain people, but I think it should be a means tested, or at least a tested thing. Anyway, that aside, superannuation, you look at superannuation, retirement funds, hedge funds, things like this. This is the largest store of wealth in the world by a long way. Okay, superannuation is a store of wealth, and superannuation funds use it. And by extension, governments can kind of use that money. They can borrow against it, and they can kind of go, hey, we're going to use that and we're going to leverage against that, or we're actually just going to use that money, but we pay it back because we're a government, and it's all good. So it gives large corporations, it gives nations access to a huge pool of money reserves that they can use, or stocks and all sorts of stuff that's thrown in there. Well, that's going to dwindle because those people who are just stuffing it into a superannuation for the rainy day, well, the rainy day is here, and they're like, yeah, I want to live my golden years now, so give it to me. And all of a sudden, we see a drop in that. Nations are looking at that and going like, shit. I wasn't telling anyone, but we were really, really relying on that. We really, really need that money. This is one of the reasons why superannuation freaks me out. Because if nations want to, they can take that. Imagine now that you've saved up your entire life. You've got $500,000, you've got $800,000, you've got $1.5 million in superannuation, and then for a number of reasons, it's no longer there, or a fraction of it is there, and that can happen in a number of ways. It can actually be taken. Okay, you can't touch that. Or one way that we're seeing just recently in France that's happened. We're just going to push the retirement age out. So there's a law that says, hey, at 55, you can tap your superannuation. You can get it. It's all yours. Then you hit 54 and you're like, oh, sweet. You're like Murdoch in Lethal Weapon. You're like, one more day until retirement. Getting too old for this shit. And then the government comes out and says, you know how we said 55 you get that money? Well, retirement age is now 65. So just keep working for another 10 years. Actually, we said 65. Let's make it 68. Yeah. It benefits them to keep pushing that up, especially when times get tough. because the likelihood of people dropping off increases. People die as they get older, shockingly. I know. People die as they get older. And if they die, where does that superannuation go? It doesn't go to them. All right. That now gets passed somewhere else. Best case scenario, it gets passed down to some children. But it's back in the bank for the big corporations and the government. So that's part of demographics as well. So older people who don't work, that's bad. Older people who consume in a different way, that's also bad. And older people who are pulling out that savings from that huge store of money, also bad. Sylvia also says happened in Italy too. I think Spain as well, but not sure. I'm pretty sure it did happen in Spain. I remember it was a couple of years ago that happened in Spain. I remember seeing something about that. Definitely happened in Italy though. Hey to 300 Survival on YouTube. Thanks for joining. Also says Iran with 84% uranium weapons. Yep. Well, you almost got me there. No reporting on weapons yet. They've got 84% refined uranium, and allegedly 90% is the number, but it has jumped up by 24% since last checked. So could be there quite quickly. Sylvie says superannuation in Italy goes to your partner only if married, otherwise goes back to the government. Yeah, like I said, best case scenario, it's going to go to the kids, or I know it does go to whoever you write into in your will in Australia, generally the kids, or to a partner. Other countries, apparently, I didn't know this, but in Italy, it only goes to the partner if married. That's a very Christian ideal, isn't it? Otherwise goes back to the government. How convenient. So there you go. Keep pushing that up. Keep pushing that retirement age up. People drop off, kick the bucket, government cashes in. Thank you. All right. What other horrific economic news do we have? China. I've talked about this in the past with the Chinese housing market or building market or construction market as a whole, that it is built on sand. The whole thing is built on sand. It's built on smoke and mirrors, and it is inevitable. It is only a matter of time before it has to just collapse. There is no way around it. Their occupancy rate is frightful. In fact, to mitigate some of these circumstances, that this looming crash, they've had to destroy buildings. There were buildings that were built. There were entire sections of cities that were built, high-rise apartments and office space and things like that. Never got a person in them, and then were destroyed. Number of reasons for that, but the main reason, I'm not going to go into depth in it. The main reason is government meddling, as always. The government went in with subsidies and we'll give you this and we've got to do this, and so people were like, fuck yeah, build this. Oh, that's not, yep, okay, we're going to use that, leverage off that, build this one. Oh, get the government grant, build this one, and just kept on building until the government was like, hey, we can't keep passing out money. And then they're like, oh well, yeah, we haven't finished any of these, by the way, so good luck with them. A lot of individual people, I want to say Zhou and Jane's, the Chinese version, Xi's and Jinping's of China were caught out. Mum and dad investors in property got really caught out, and it's getting quite bad over there. Anyway, this story coming in here, talking about essentially, it's not specifically talking about Chinese market. It's talking about office rental markets, which is part of the sector that I was talking about. What it's particularly talking about is something that I always say to look out for, which is where the money goes. Watch where money goes, because people who are wheeling and dealing a lot of money on stock markets, they're not doing it willy-nilly. They're researching, they're looking at stuff, and where you can see money go or money get pulled away from, you're like, something's going on there. What we've seen is a number of US capital markets start to short, in particular, the Chinese office rental market. There's the same sort of people or ilk, I guess, that shorted US bricks and mortar not too long ago, where they saw the writing on the wall a few years back and were like, yeah, like retail is going online. Okay, all these malls and stuff like that, the whole culture is going to change. So short it. They shorted it. They made bank on that because those things started going under left, right, and center. Then they did the same in the US during COVID with office space because people are going to work from home. And to a certain extent, a lot of people still do. Made bank on that. So where are they shorting now? Chinese office space. They can see it. They can see the writing on the wall there, as everyone should be able to. All right, what else have we got here? I just want to say this on that Chinese rental market as well. Why is this important? Any large sector of the Chinese construction market, the Chinese housing market, if you link those two together, it is at the moment, like I said, it's built on sand, it's smoke and mirrors, and it's kind of at this point here where it's leaning against each other. There's all these pillars that have fallen, but they're kind of like blocked. And the main blocking pillar is the CCP because they're just like through sheer force of will are just holding it up. You pull one of those pillars out, you're looking for this collapse. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some sort of collapse in China because once it goes, they'll all go. Unfortunately, every other country on the face of the earth is very exposed to all Chinese markets. The Chinese housing market, the Chinese market as a whole. The Chinese housing market goes down, you can bet the Chinese economy will follow suit. The Chinese economy goes down, and that's the big gurgle. That's the plug being pulled out, and we'll all get pulled down with it. Like, we're not talking about recession there. We're talking definite depression going on there. All right, what else is going on in the world? Oh, back over in the Ukraine, Uncle Joe Biden decided to pop over and just cut a check for 500 mil to Zelensky. There you go, mate. Thought I'd deliver this one in person this time. It's very nice of him. Apparently, made some calls to Moscow as well before he went. And said, "Hey, I'm going to Kiev. By the way, can you just not shoot there for a day or two?" And it worked. So, just shows you. Interesting stuff going on behind the scenes there. Let's talk about North Korea for a second. Like I said, there's a lot of news coming out of the Ring of Fire, or the smiley face of doom. North Korea warns of turning Pacific into a firing range after the latest missile test. So yet another missile fired off into the poor Pacific. What did it ever do to anyone? I just wonder if there's some like dolphins or whales or fish or whatever just floating around. All of a sudden, like, what was that? An ICBM? Another one? Far out! What is going on here? They just keep firing off these missiles into the water. Anyway, they're getting uppity again. They are firing off more missiles as a bit of a dick swinging contest, as they want to do lately, and following it up with some words that they're turning this into a firing range. Some pretty disturbing stuff going on in and around this area, but it just shows you that North Korea, the gloves are very much off. Where in the past they've kind of done a couple of little things, and everyone's gone, yeah, whatever. You just stay up there, and your communism will eventually collapse and you'll die. Well, it hasn't for whatever reason, and from what we've seen of their latest display of their military, they have increased substantially. And what we can see with their technology of their missiles, they have also increased substantially. So it's pretty concerning because they're growing more confident by the day. So yet another conflict that can kick off at any second. US and Philippines look to establish joint Coast Guard patrols in East Asia. So this is from CNN, saying the Philippines and the United States are discussing conducting joint Coast Guard patrols. There is already a clear path of possibility since the Defense Department of the United States has also supported the joint patrol with Philippine Navy and the US Navy. So there is a certainty for this particular joint patrol to happen between the Coast Guard of both countries. that coming from the Philippine side. Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. This is obviously a slap in the face to China. This is US saying, hey, look, NATO, it's coming down here. The new NATO, the PATO. No, that doesn't make any sense. The Pacific Treaty Organization, the potato, I'll call it. The Pacific and Asia Treaty and Torrential Organization, the potato. So yeah, US obviously pushing their standing more into this area, more into Southeast Asia. Philippines, one of the big countries down here that in this neck of the woods that's very worried about what China's doing. So and Philippines obviously having very, very strong ties historically with the US. So no surprises really. All right. Just to finish off with a couple of weather effects. Hey, there's another earthquake in Turkey. This one 6.4. There's actually two, 6.4, and this report doesn't have it, but I think it was a 5.8 that happened right in the south of Turkey along that border with Syria again. So there's only a couple of weeks since we had the big one over there. People are obviously very worried. And another earthquake is going to have people freaking out, and obviously there'll be a huge effect. This one was felt it was felt in Syria, obviously, but as far away as Egypt and Lebanon. I'm not sure why they put Egypt before Lebanon, because it would go through Lebanon to get to Egypt. Anyway, geography. 35 dead in Brazil, flooding and landslides. So torrential rain in the country's Sao Paulo state has sparked devastating floods and landslides, leaving 35 people dead. Fatalities will continue rising as rescue teams battle chaotic conditions to reach or find those affected. So just finishing off here again, like, what does a landslide mean to you in Brazil? Probably not much, but these sorts of things can happen anywhere in the world at any time. Weather effects are something we should definitely prep for, I believe. In fact, was just talking about this with my bro yesterday about building a bushfire grab bag, a bushfire evacuation bag, I guess, which is one of the things in Australia we're very concerned about. I have such a thing, not necessarily bushfire, but just an evacuation bag or a series of bags. Here you go, Instagram, a little bit behind the scenes there. You see them? That's my fire bag. So that's my firefighting bag. It's got all my firefighting equipment. That one there is a camp setup minus shelter, and that one there is shelter. So 3 duffel bags filled with some. All right, YouTube. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Fire bag. That's the camp bag, and that's my shelter bag. I didn't want you guys to feel like you were lacking on anything, you YouTubians. These are things that are worthwhile while building, I think. Of course, I will do everything I can to stay in my own house as much as possible. I have so much stuff here. I have axes and daggers that hang on walls. I have whiskey. I have Metallica albums and banjos and many, many fine books. But I might not get the choice. That's my point. I might not get the choice to stay here. So if I'm pushed off this location, I want to know that I have everything that I need to set up a place to live for a little while for me and the family. Spice Girl 27 says, asks the question, do you think HARP is a geo weapon? Not particularly. I don't think of it. Well, let me put it this way. I haven't seen enough evidence to convince me that it would be utilized in such a way overtly. I think maybe subtly, maybe accidentally, but yeah, I don't think it is. I think weather effects that we're seeing at the moment have other causes. But as always, I'm willing to be proven wrong on all things, and I reserve the right to change my mind when I get more information. Which, just as a handy little tip, is how I think we should all frame our minds nowadays. There's too many people with rigid mindsets. Rigid mindset in my line of work is a dead person. Adaptability, mental adaptability, is one of the key differentiating factors from people who survive emergency situations from people who die in emergency situations. So remain flexible, my friends. Semper Gumby. That's it for today. Speaking about Latin, I'm going to do the little wrap up. So thank you very much for joining me. As always, I really appreciate it. If you've got any questions, fire them through to me. Love to hear from you guys. Apart from that, don't tell anyone to join any of these channels, please. Don't hit like, don't hit subscribe, because I made a bet on the last one that I'd do a SitRep in a bikini if numbers got to 5,000 on YouTube or 10,000. Was it 10,000? Yeah, 10,000 on Instagram. Anyway, so don't do it. The first rule about Ragnarok survival is we do not talk about Ragnarok survival. All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open. Keep situationally aware when you're out in a public space, no matter what's happening. Keep prepping. Keep storing up food. Get in the garden. Grow some stuff. And damn it, Shelley 208, you've already talked. And I'll see you guys next time. Semper Paratus.